Ronin Mode, Unmasked. Chapter 25, Christmas Lights and Quiet Decisions. After I walked back to my aunt's house, Dawn was blowing up my phone. I did not answer. I did not even look. I just put my phone on silent and let it keep buzzing like a problem I was done dealing with for the night. Then the text messages started coming in. One after another. But I did not read them either. I just put my phone away somewhere out of reach and sat there for a minute, trying to breathe, trying to think, trying not to let everything I was feeling boil over all at once. It was one of those moments where your body is still standing, but your mind is already somewhere else. At that point, nobody was really at my aunt's house for the moment except my younger cousin Paul. Everybody called him Pee-wee. Short little dude. Small-built young guy. I think he was barely 18 or 19, if I remember right. Earlier in the day we had hung out for a little while, and he had not seen me in forever. Maybe 10 years or longer. He was impressed by how much I had changed, and he kept talking about how he wanted me to help him start working out and getting into martial arts. The problem was, he had one bad leg from an accident when he was little. He could still walk perfectly fine, but he had a bad limp, and running was out of the question for him. So when he saw me, he lit up like a kid who finally had somebody to look up to. "Bro, you back?" "What happened?" he asked me. He already knew I was supposed to spend the day with Dawn. I did not tell him the whole situation because, honestly, the shit was embarrassing. So I just told him the truth. "I had it out with Dawn," I said. "And I think it's finally over. Like, for good." He leaned back and looked at me for a second. He did not really say much, but I could tell he felt bad for me. He just did not know what to say. Then he perked up a little and said, "Well, since you're here, can you show me some of those karate moves?" I shrugged. "Maybe later. I need to go back to my apartment and get some of my things." But even as I said that, I already knew something inside me had changed. I was not going to spend the holidays alone in that apartment. I just could not do it. I could already see the future if I kept living like that. I could see the next 20 years of my life flashing by. Me stuck in that dump apartment. Alone. No wife. No children. Still bothering the few real friends I had left while everybody else moved on with their lives, got married, had families, and built something real. And I would just be there. Frozen in place. The sad guy people talked about quietly like they felt bad for him because he could never find anybody normal and settle down. I did not want that for myself. And I knew for a fact my mother would not have wanted that for me either. So I already made up my mind. I was going to spend the holidays with the few real family members I had left. My aunt. That was where I belonged right then. Later that night, I got a ride from Chris back to my apartment so I could pack a bag. I just grabbed fresh clothes, my hygiene stuff, shaving cream, deodorant, aftershave, my polo black cologne, a few nice dress clothes for the holidays, and some workout stuff. Just enough to get through Christmas without having to come back to that empty apartment every night and sit there alone with my thoughts. On the ride back, I told Chris what had happened with Dawn. He shook his head and said, "That sucks, man. I feel for you." Then after a second he looked over at me and said, "Not to put any more pressure on you, Paul, not like you don't already have enough, but have you given any more thought about Sophie?" I let out a breath and leaned back in the passenger seat. Chris kept driving, but I could tell he was being careful with me. Not pushy. Just honest. "I'm going to say this for the last time," he said. "And then I'm not going to bring it up again. But I think you and Sophie would be good for each other. And your aunt feels the same way. I stayed quiet for a little while, just looking out the window. Christmas lights were everywhere. On houses. In yards. Wrapped around fences. Blinking red and green and white all up and down the street. People were decorating their homes like everything was warm and peaceful and normal, like nobody in the world was hurting. I stared at all those lights and thought about how, this time last year, me and Dawn used to drive around the neighborhood just looking at everybody's Christmas decorations. Her kid Bobs would get a real kick out of it. I could still see it in my head. The way she laughed. The way we used to ride around with nowhere to be. For a minute I just sat there with that memory in my chest, and it hurt in a way I did not even know how to explain. Chris glanced over at me, but he did not say anything. He just kept his eyes on the road. Finally I said, "Tell Sophie to call me, Chris. Give her my number." Chris nodded. "But I can't make you any promises," I said. "I will give it a shot." He looked at me, then said, "That's all anybody can ask." Then I took a breath and kept going. "But I'm going to be honest with her. I'm going to tell her about my past and all the bullshit I've been through. I do not want to lie and have Sophie think I'm some perfect guy with no problems in life." Chris nodded right away. "Of course," he said. "Being honest is always the best way." And he meant that. I could tell he meant it. That was one of the reasons I respected him. He was not trying to sell me some fantasy. He was not trying to pretend my life was simple when it was not. He just thought I deserved something real. And maybe for the first time in a while, somebody looking at me that way made me feel like maybe I still could have something real too. By the time we got back, my bag was packed, my mind was still a mess, and Dawn finally stopped calling and texting. And I was done chasing that feeling. Done chasing the same kind of pain over and over. I was tired. Not just physically tired. Life tired. I went upstairs and unpacked my things. My aunt was kind enough to give me one of the kids' rooms just for the next few days. And later after that, we all sat down and had a nice family dinner together. Me. Pee-wee. My aunt. Chris. Pizza. Everybody. And I remember how nice it was having family around sometimes. Do not get me wrong, my mom's side of the family had its problems. Especially when it came to too much partying, drugs, serious relationship problems, all that shit. Honestly, that was one of the main reasons I decided to live on my own for the past 2 years. But since I had been gone, things seemed to have improved ever so slightly. And I was glad. There was something comforting about that table. About the noise. About plates being passed around. About people laughing in the background while the Christmas lights outside blinked against the windows. For a little while, it almost felt normal. Almost. Later that night, in the room my aunt had given me, I was just scrolling on my laptop when I heard a commotion downstairs. At first it was just noise. Then the tone changed. Then voices got louder. I came out of my room and saw Chris and my aunt arguing. Not out of anger exactly. It seemed more out of concern. Something was wrong. The air in the house had changed. You could feel it. Chris was yelling, "I have to go. It's my son. What about my grandbabies?" My aunt yelled back, "Fine. But not without me, you're not. We're in this together, Chris. Not just for the good times, but for the bad times too." Chris smashed the beer bottle in his hands on the kitchen floor in protest. Glass went everywhere. It happened so fast it made the whole kitchen feel like it stopped breathing for a second. You can't. It could be dangerous. That was when I stepped out and yelled, "Hey! What's going on? Chris looked at me, somewhat relieved. Paul, I have to go. It's an emergency. Can you please stay and watch the house and your aunt for me? I'll only be gone a few days. Why, Chris? What happened? It's my son, he said. He's in some kind of trouble and I'm worried about him and my grandbabies. Is this back in Phoenix? I asked. Yeah, he said. Phoenix. I looked at him and said, Chris, you've been drinking and you should not go anywhere in your condition. Give me the keys to the car and I will drive you to Phoenix myself. He just stared at me for a second. Then he smiled at me like he could not believe I really said that. You would do that for me? Yeah, I would, I said. You're not a bad guy, Chris. Plus you're married to my aunt. I would feel like shit if anything happened to you when I could have helped instead. He nodded slowly. The whole room felt like it was holding its breath. Okay, Paul. Thank you. But I'm warning you, it could be dangerous. What happened? He rubbed his face, then said, I do not know the whole story yet, but apparently not more than 20 minutes ago a bunch of guys broke right into my son's house and started robbing the place at gunpoint while his wife and my grandbabies were there. My stomach dropped. It was like the whole house got colder. Is everybody safe? Did anybody get hurt? No, thank God, he said. But everybody is scared. The cops are at his house right now. I have to leave tonight and make sure everybody is okay. I nodded immediately. Got you, Chris, I said. Let me pack my bag. Ronin Mode, Unmasked. Chapter 26, The Road to Phoenix. We stopped at a gas station before hitting the road. The tank needed to be filled, and honestly, so did we. It was around 10 o'clock at night, maybe a little later, and we still had a long drive ahead of us. Luckily, after I ate dinner at my aunt's house, I had ended up taking a nap for a few hours because I was still mentally exhausted from everything that had happened over the last few days. So by the time we left, I was tired, but I was good enough to drive. Chris's car was a late-model Hyundai Sonata if I remember right. My aunt ended up coming with us too, because there was no talking her out of it. She was not about to let Chris head off into something like that alone. So it ended up being me driving, Chris and my aunt in the back seat, and the road stretching out in front of us like one long heavy thought. The night felt cold and open. The kind of night where the highway lights keep passing by and you start feeling like the world is getting left behind 1 mile at a time. On the way, we played a lot of music. Luckily, I had a bunch of burned CDs I had made on my laptop when I first got it, so we had plenty to listen to. I played Chris that Lacuna Coil cover of Enjoy the Silence, and he was vibing with it right away. He was also a 9 Inch Nails fan, which honestly made me respect him even more. We listened to With Teeth. He liked that too. I also played him Dark Angel by VNV Nation, and he had never heard that before. He liked that one too. That was the thing about a long night drive. Music just hits different when you are somewhere between one life and the next. Between where you were and where you are going. And all the while, we were talking. Chris was talking here and there. My aunt was dozing off in the back seat. And every now and then Chris would glance at me and say something that reminded me he was not just some random dude in my life anymore. He was family now. Or at least close enough. At one point he laughed and said, "Looks like Sophie's not going to need to call you after all." I smiled a little and said, "Is she going to be there too?" Honestly, I had almost forgotten about Sophie and all the commotion. But truthfully, thinking back on it now, somewhere in the back of my mind I was hoping I would get a chance to see her in person. Chris nodded. "Yeah, Paul. She only lives a few blocks away from my son's house with her mom. That made me start feeling a little anxious. Not bad anxious. Just that nervous kind of energy you get when something new is coming and you do not know how it is going to hit yet. I looked over at Chris for a second and said, "Look, man, I want to say thanks for being super cool with me and even going as far as trying to hook me up with your niece. And my aunt seems to really like you too." Chris gave me a small look like he was waiting to see where I was going with that. I went on. "I honestly never thought she would ever leave my Uncle Jackie. I mean, they had been together forever." Chris did not say anything right away. He just listened. And the truth was, I had a lot of history in my head with people like my Uncle Jackie. As much as we all loved him, he could be selfish at times. Every few months the dude would just disappear for like a week and we all knew what he was doing. Getting high in some cheap motel room with God knows who. He would always come back unless he got arrested. That happened a lot through the years too. He would come back and just act like nothing ever happened. And my aunt would just put up with it. Year after year. My own mother used to tell me about that when she was alive. And honestly, Chris, no woman deserves all that bullshit. Chris looked at me and nodded, but I could tell he did not really know what to say. Then I kept going because once I started, I could not really stop. "I hope all goes well with me and Sophie," I said. "I really do. But at the end of the day, me and her are strangers. We never met or even spoke on the phone. And yeah, you said she thinks I'm handsome, and that's flattering and all, but if it does not happen, if we do not click for whatever reason, try not to take it personal, bro. I just feel like everybody has such high expectations and I'm honestly not used to it." Chris turned and looked at me while he was still keeping his eyes on the road. "Paul, you worry too much." "I know, Chris," I said. "I got that shit from my mother." He nodded like that made sense. Then he said, "All I'm saying is, Paul, you got to have more faith. You got to believe that you are a good person and you deserve good things to happen for you and your life. I know you had it rough these past few years, but you got to leave that shit in the past and try and move your life in a positive direction. I know you've been trying your best. Just trust that it's all going to work out in the end, man." I smiled back at him a little. Not because everything suddenly felt okay, but because for a minute it felt like somebody actually believed in me without making me prove anything first. "You really think so, bro?" I asked. Chris laughed and said, "Fuck yeah, man." That hit me harder than I expected. Because sometimes that is all a person really needs. Not a miracle. Not some huge emotional speech. Just somebody telling you straight up that you are not broken beyond repair. So I asked him, "What can you tell me about Sophie? What kind of girl is she, honestly?" Chris paused for a second like he had to really think about it. Then he said, "Sophie is a good person. But she had it hard too." That got my attention right away. "How so?" I asked. Chris glanced at me and kept talking. Her dad, who she was really close with, passed about 2 years ago now. He was a good man. Always put his family first. I nodded slowly. "I can relate to all of that," I said. "What else?" Chris laughed a little. "She is kind of a tomboy." I let out a small laugh too. "Don't get me wrong, Sophie is very pretty, especially when she gets all dolled up like for the holidays and stuff," he said, "but she spent most of her life helping her dad with car stuff. The dude was a master mechanic. Knew everything there is to know when it comes to classic cars and restoration." "That's dope," I said honestly. "Yeah," Chris said. "He had a lot of them back in the day. Dodge Chargers, Pontiac GTOs. I think he even had a classic Mustang. 69. I shook my head a little. That's badass. Then I asked, so what happened? Chris's face got serious. The problem is Sophie's father started having health problems. People say it was because he worked so much and never really took care of himself. He was always worried about taking care of everybody else. That part hit me. Because I knew men like that. The kind who will give everything to everybody else and leave nothing for themselves. He kept going. The dude never had any sons, so Sophie would try and help him in any way she could ever since she was just a little girl. That makes sense, I said. That explains why she's a tomboy. Chris nodded. Then what happened to her dad? I asked. He took a breath before answering. He had a major heart attack right in front of Sophie. He called an ambulance, they rushed him to the hospital, and they tried to save him, but he flatlined on the way. He did not even make it to the hospital. And the worst part was Sophie was right there when it happened. She saw the whole thing by herself. I just sat there for a second. Damn, I said quietly. That's rough. Yeah, Chris said. We were all heartbroken when her dad died. He was only in his early 40s too. Wow, I said. That's around the same age my mom died. Chris looked over at me then, like he knew that landed hard. That's what I've been telling you, Paul. You guys already have a lot in common. I nodded slowly. Okay, I said. I understand. Then I asked, what about her boyfriend history and stuff? Chris smiled a little at that, like he knew exactly what I was really asking. I know this much. She only ever had one boyfriend, and they were together for about a year. But it did not end up working because apparently the guy was a jerk and ended up cheating on her. That sucks, I said. I know the feeling. But understand this too, Paul, Chris said. Sophie is not a party girl. She never did any drugs. In fact, she hates that stuff. And she is old-fashioned. Meaning she can be super shy. I nodded. That makes sense if she only ever had one boyfriend, I said. It was mostly because of her father, Chris said. He was super strict and would not even let Sophie date until she was like 17. I sat there for a moment trying to process everything Chris had just told me. It was a lot. But it was also the first time I had heard about Sophie like she was a real person and not just some name being thrown around in conversation. A real girl. A real story. A real pain. A real life. Finally I said, okay, Chris. Thank you for the info. 1000% facts.